Welcome back to Smoked BBQ Source. I'm Ricer, and today I'm doing a very easy jerky recipe that all of you can follow along with. Jerky is one of the few cooking methods where the goal is to actually pull out all the moisture and you end up with a piece of dry meat. I truly enjoy making jerky, and I do a lot of it. I tend to average about 10 batches a year. I end up doing so much because number one, it is a great snack to have around for almost anyone. Number two, my boys are very athletic and they are always on the go. So jerky is a great snack to throw in their backpack. And number three, it is super easy to make. It just takes a little bit of time. The great thing about this recipe, pretty much all of you already have the ingredients right in your kitchen, but you'll end up with some packed full of flavor, delicious beef jerky that's easy to chew and not that tough. When it comes to the meat that you want to use, traditionally jerky is made out of beef. But where I live, I would say venison is just as popular because we have a lot of hunters. We have a lot of white-tailed deer here, so it is readily available and it is a very lean meat and works great for jerky. Today for this cook, I used a beef eye of round. It's easy for me to find at my local grocery store and it's pretty economical. A couple other lean cuts of beef that I use is a London broil, a top round, or sometimes I even find some sirloin tip that's on sale, and that makes excellent jerky too. One key tip is that you don't want a lot of intermuscular fat in your jerky. With that being said, I didn't trim any of the fat off this eye round at all because my youngest son actually kind of likes the rancid, smoky, dried up beef fat flavor, and I guess he's actually not really the only person that feels this way because on prior jerky videos that I've done in the past, I've had comments that, hey, leave that fat on. It's actually better than you think. I disagree, but my youngest, he says, yes, I love it. But I still suggest that you trim out all the outer fat on anything that you're gonna cook up into jerky. Now, maybe you might like what my son likes, so leave a little slab of fat on there and give it a whirl. I'm only doing 2.5 pounds of jerky today, so I'm just using my knife to slice up this eye of round. I started out by cutting across the grain into about 1/3 of an inch slices, and then sliced them in half so I had a little bit more manageable pieces to work with. Because I cut this jerky across the grain, we will have a much more tender and chewable bite. I also sometimes cut beef jerky with the grain, and that is my preferred way to make jerky when I'm doing a bunch of it. But I don't use my knife, I actually use my meat slicer. It just is a lot easier and I get those pieces a lot more in uniform shape. Cutting jerky with the grain is gonna make that bite a little stringier and a tougher chew, but that means that jerky is gonna last a tad longer. This jerky marinade is really simple, and my guess is a lot of you are gonna have the ingredients right in your kitchen already. If not, it's just a quick little run to the grocery store if you're missing something. We will have a link in the description where you can find this complete recipe on this marinade and jerky. But grab a pen and some paper or your cell phone notepad thing, and I'll do a quick rundown of it. Start by using a glass or plastic bowl. Add a 1/2 cup of soy sauce, a 1/2 cup of Worcester sauce, Worcester, horsey, whatever you want to call it, you know, the brown sauce. 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 tablespoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of ginger powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, and finally 1 teaspoon of black pepper. Make sure you mix this really good. You want all that brown sugar, salt, and that ginger powder to dissolve. FYI, do not use a metal bowl. The acids in this marinade can actually react and spoil your meat if you plan to use the same bowl to marinate this jerky. Grab your meat out of the fridge and then take it out of that bag and start putting it in the marinade. You want to swashbuckle it all around, make sure it's coated well. Continue until all of it has been completely marinated, and then just cover up that bowl and put it back in the fridge. Or if you're like me, you're going to put it in a vacuum sealer bag so you can get that marinated meat sealed up airtight. Squish it around a little bit and let that meat marinate in the fridge for at least 12 to 24 hours. When it comes to drying this jerky out, you can use a smoker, a dehydrator, or an oven. I prefer to use a smoker. Smoke adds another layer of flavor to my jerky, and in my opinion, it doesn't taste the same without it. I typically always use an electric smoker to cook my jerky because you can set these type of smokers at a lower temp. You don't want to cook this jerky, you just want to slowly pull the moisture out. And because electric smokers run so efficiently at temps down around 130 130 to 160 degrees, they are really easy to manage during these longer cooks. You can also smoke jerky on a pellet grill or an offset. On an offset, it might be a little tricky to keep those temps down, but on your pellet grill, just crank it down to the lowest setting and watch out for any hot spots that you have in the pit. Again, remember, we're not trying to actually cook this jerky. For today's cook, I use this Charbroil electric smoker. It has some really nice racks for cooking jerky. They're small and there's not big gaps in between the rods. When you're loading up this jerky, just make sure that you leave plenty of room in between each piece. If you end up overlapping them or having them all folded up, then they're not going to cook evenly. The gaps in between all of them is also going to let that smoke give it a nice little kiss as it's going by. But if your strips are cut into some pretty thin and small pieces, I do suggest you get some wire cooling racks to load it up on. This way they're going to stay where they're supposed to and not fall on to the bottom of the pit. When it comes to the type of wood that you should use, it's really up to you to experiment. I use either oak, hickory, or cherry for my jerky. For this 2.5 pounds of beef jerky, I filled up that smoke box a little over a quarter full of hickory wood chips. Be careful on the amount of wood that you use when you're smoking jerky because that meat is sliced nice and thin and it can take on a lot of smoke. Now obviously that's going to depend on the type of wood or smoker that you're using. This is something you're just going to have to experiment with until you find the perfect amount that you're looking for. I ran this Charbroil at 160 degrees for 4 hours. Then I went ahead and flipped all the jerky over just to speed up the cooking process a tad. I've been asked before by other people, do you think that when you flip it over you're losing any flavor to that jerky? I don't, not after 4 hours. That's just the moisture in the water starting to come out of that meat. Then after 3 more hours, this jerky was starting to finish up. So ultimately I had right around 7 hours to cook 2.5 pounds of jerky. So yeah, this is a time-consuming cook, so if you have more room in your smoker, double or triple this recipe and make a bigger batch. There is 3 ways to be able to tell that your jerky is done. Number 1, it is shrunk down to about 50% of the original size. Number 2, you don't see any oily residue on any of the meat. And number 3, when you bend it, it doesn't snap back. Because we cut this across the grain, it's just gonna break. But when you've cut it with the grain, when you bend it, you want it to stay bent. You don't want it to snap back. Now that I broke off this piece, I gotta try it, right? It's very good. Because this recipe doesn't use any pink salt or number 1 cure in the recipe, you're gonna have to put it like in a Ziploc bag or a mason jar and store it in the fridge. This jerky is not shelf safe. But seeing that I only did 2.5 pounds, and after me having a few samples along with the boys, we got about a pound left. This won't even last 2 nights. And obviously it's gonna be gone fast because this is some pretty good looking jerky. This recipe has a nice salty, sweet flavor that I think along with the smoke, everyone will enjoy. Just don't hand out too much of it because I promise you, you're gonna have people begging you to make more. If you're looking for a more in-depth on making this jerky, check the links in the description below. We're gonna have all kinds of stuff, information, and pieces and parts to help you have a successful jerky cook. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next video.